Good morning. I appreciate everybody coming today. My name is Lucas Whaley. I'm the Director of Technology for Lima One Capital, and I'm joined by my co-speaker.
My name is Jason Kane. I'm a solutions architect for Matillion.
So what I really want to talk about today is a relatable journey, I guess, a conversation about how a company that is growing quickly and didn't have a lot in the analytics space, went from really zero to analytics in a very short period of time with limited internal resources. And so it really I view it as kind of like this question, and this isn't something I knew the answer to a year and a half ago before starting this journey. So really what I want to cover is, this is not going to be like a technical review of any one aspect of the project, but these are a lot of things that I would have liked to have known before starting this, and also I want to share the success that we've had in this, and I think all that will be very relatable. And in addition, be honest about some things that we could have done better, because I think that's a good takeaway for everyone. So really what we want to look at is, the challenges that we experienced as a company, kind of build the state of where things were. If you're a report writer in a larger organization and your tools are limited, maybe, data access is an issue due to, governance or just the tools available. I think this session is going to be relatable in that way. Or you may just be curious about the Matillion tool. Or you may be a smaller company that's interested in undertaking one of these projects yourselves, and there's really not a lot out there to really guide you. So what I want to share a little bit about is the key decision points that we made as a company, along with things like, how we built our requirements, kind of basically how we picked the right technology partner, because with one person internally dedicated to this, picking the right strategic partner was crucial. And then also how we selected the tools. So, we went with really modern tooling, and I want to share our process there. So a little bit about our company. So if you're not in financial services, I think this will still be relatable. But Lima One Capital is a real estate investment lender and servicer. So a little bit of backstory, I won't spend a lot of time here, but so post-financial crisis, there's a large housing supply available in properties that were ripe for investment. So people buying and fixing and flipping homes. The supply was there, but capital was fairly inaccessible. There were a couple of regional lenders, but mostly you would have to know somebody with cash and borrow from them. And so that access to institutional capital wasn't there. And so our founder, after returning from Iraq with his service in the Marines, was disappointed, I guess, after fixing and flipping a few homes at the availability of capital, and so started our company. So really what we do is, it's all non-owner occupied, but we deal with short-term fix and flip homes, so all the way from somebody wanting, maybe they watch too much Chip and Joanna Gaines, and they decide to fix and flip a home 2 blocks over, we would finance that, all the way to more professional real estate investors, all the way from single-family rental portfolios to a product we're actually seeing a lot of now, and really proud of, is our rehab around multifamily properties. So we're seeing a lot in kind of the affordable and what's called workforce housing space, and that's been a really, really good product for us. So, and also in summary, we've originated over $2 billion totally, and we've doubled in size in the last 10 months. So a lot of organic growth. So with that growth, scaling, both in the volume of business and the head count, we definitely reached a point where, honestly, a lot of the stuff we were doing was Excel-based a year and a half ago. So, I'm sure everybody's got some database out there in Excel at some company that they can't kill because the tools were just there. And so we were finding and coming across problems that we really were questions that we really couldn't answer about our business because of the lack of tools that we had. We were getting data requests, we were onboarding new investors, and so we really reached a point, and it's not an atypical case, but where we knew that we needed to undertake a project like this. So I do want to spend a little bit on how our industry guided the requirements. So being that we're non-owner occupied, I'm sure most people out here have been exposed to the mortgage process. So you might get 2 or 3 of those in your lifetime. So on the right here is kind of where a borrower would get a mortgage, and that mortgage is on a property. But when we're talking about real estate investing, we're talking about a much more difficult or complex entity structure, and nothing crazy, but being able to pack and unpack this to understand relationships, because most of our borrowers are repeat, which is something not typical in mortgage. We may have somebody do 65 loans with us at a time. There's a lot of value here in understanding the relationship and not just a loan. So, if you get a mortgage, you probably never talk to the person you did your mortgage with again, and they sell your loan to half a dozen different servicers. But with us, it's a really managed relationship, and the answer really for the questions we were trying to answer was not just, we have Salesforce for our CM. It was not just pumping all this data into our CRM, because when we started building the case of why we would build the warehouse and start this analytics journey, it was because we have I'm sure if you're in financial services, the loan origination system, which statistically, if you have one, none of you love it. If you're not in financial services, you're ERP. But really, we had the typical case of disparate systems. We didn't have access to data really between systems. And so if we wanted to understand something about a relationship, we could only look at things in snapshots. So if we wanted to understand the sales relationship, we'd go to Salesforce, but that was really incomplete when we talked about, the underwriting around that relationship and, the servicing and loan performance. And, you can look at that from the servicing end on the downstream. So really, like I said, creating something that would let us understand a relationship and not just a loan. And I won't spend really any time on this, but this is just to show that what we were going for was not just lifting a schema out of our one of our core systems and then calling it a data warehouse. So we really needed to think about things. This is a very summary view. This is just a summary, a database diagram, but we really wanted to understand things at the loan level, understand things about properties, and then understand the relationship as a whole. And then we definitely had some organizational challenges, and I think this will be relatable for a lot of people. So, of course, we had limited capital, we had limited time. So at the time we started this project, we had 2 people dedicated to technology in the company. It was myself and 1 person on the infrastructure side. So, with that, we knew that assembling the requirements for this and picking the right strategic partner was going to be really vital. And I'll get into kind of what we found there. But overall, it was the need for a data strategy. We definitely reached a point of maturity where that was becoming required. So we really set out to do this quickly and efficiently, but with something that could scale. So data access. So a lot of you, if you deal with hosted applications, production data access is I would say scarce. It is in my industry. So we had some issues with getting access to data with some of our core technology partners, and then nothing too atypical in regards to data sources. But we knew we needed to, for an immature company, having everything Excel based, that is a huge amount of data sources that you're having to hit to handle basic reporting. And so we knew we needed something to access that. But what I do want to talk about is how we selected our strategic partner in this. So really what we found is we bid this, we looked at about 6 different companies. Firms that came in that, built this did an implementation or built this whole like business intelligence lifecycle. And what we found is kind of like 3 tiers. There were the first tier of people that came in. They really, they would walk in the door and they would immediately start talking about tools, like what tools you have. And then they would immediately want to just try to LOE everything in the agreements, get the hours in, and then just to give you a number so they could put a scope of work in front of you. So then there was really a second tier that they came in and they really asked the right questions about our business, what we were looking to understand, what was our success criteria and the outcome of all this for our expectations. And that was definitely on the right track. But then what really shined in our partner that we ended up selecting Data Meaning is they came in with a background in the financial services industry because we saw firms that specialize in healthcare, that specialize in manufacturing. But finding someone that understood the business context and could come in and tell you the questions you should be asking in a lot of ways was invaluable. And we'll get into how that helped immensely in tool selection as well. So someone I would really advise like somebody to come in that was relatable and that understood your business because, or else you spend a lot of the project time just transferring business context over. So really, when we started to dig in and look at the requirements for everything, there were some core reporting and analytics needs. So, I'm big on tying everything to business outcome and quantifying that. We use the OKR system. I don't know if anybody's familiar, that is inherent in it. So what we did was we collected about 20 questions that we know the business needed to answer, and these were questions that we either could answer at the time, but the time involved or effort involved was so cumbersome that it really wasn't efficient. And then there were some questions that we couldn't answer because we didn't have the tools available. And so, the growing company needs to know more and more about their business. And so it was really fit or funneled down into 3 main categories. So that's really what we targeted. So we knew that there was an established success criteria. If we could answer those key questions, then we knew this would be a successful project. And then I'll talk about tooling a little bit. So when we started looking at tooling, a lot of people wanted to leverage what you already have in time at the time. So, use your own premise SQL server that you have, and then just use the tools available and try to do it as cheaply and efficiently as possible. But we knew, being a growing business, that there were certain, it was really hard to forecast our future data needs and requirements. So something cloud-based was a necessity. And this is really where Data Meaning came in to help us. From where I sit, I can't spend a lot of time keeping up with every tool in the industry. I can't spend a lot of time, and as much as I love all the stuff that they have at Tableau, because this week's been great, unless you're constantly immersed in that, there's a lot of noise. And so it's really hard for someone in my seat to parse out what's flavor and what's function. So that's where, like I said, a partner really came in to help guide that. So, and we had some other basic requirements, like we knew it needed to be easy to use and administrate because I want people focused on analytics and not infrastructure, especially at a small company. We've grown since this point to where we're a team of 10 people, but we still have 1 person dedicated in-house to this full life cycle. And then also, targeting a quick implementation and ramp up, so we had a backlog of needs that were growing that we knew we needed to be answered. And so what we really ended up settling on, this is our technology stack. So we use Snowflake for our cloud data warehouse. That was an easy sell for us. Easy to administrate, easy to configure and manage, and you don't have to think about storage. So I can bring in a ton of marketing data. I can bring in anything unstructured and then just leave it and not have to worry about that and just pay for compute. So that was great from a cost perspective for us, as well as ease of use to manage and then just connect to anything, basically. Matillion, so our ETL engine, what we were going for there, cost effective and very easy to use with the components that lie within it and systems and connections there, or the connections there rather. We had a lot of, what we were kind of running into is a lot of people would put larger enterprise tools that took a large staff to run in front of us because they were selling us the capability but not really understanding where we were. But really, we got the best of both worlds. And now, we selected Tableau for our data visualization tool. It was the best data visualization tool available, and it really could help us answer some of these questions that I'm going to get into in a little bit, and show some of the visuals that we now have. So I want to hand it over to Jason to talk a little bit about the Matillion tool, but in all, we feel like picking this technology stack was instrumental in getting this stood up and moving to where, instead of building, we're actually focused on analytics. We're able to do all this within about a quarter with pretty minimal staff. So with that, I want to hand it over to my co-speaker, Jason.
Thanks, Lucas. So, pretty common problem, right? Just like Lucas, you need to provide numbers for your business, right? But you got data all over the place. You know what you need to do, right? You need to get it all into one place so you can create relationships between those, tie those data sets together so you can use them on your reports. But there's just you, maybe one or two other people on the project. Timelines are always short, and you need a tool that everybody can figure out. And you need one that's not going to break the bank when you ask your boss to pay for it. And so Matillion's really going to be that tool for you. It's a cloud-native ETL tool, specifically designed for data transformation with cloud data warehouses. It's easy to use, it's fast because it uses the CDW you already have to move and change the data, and it's cloud-based. So as you add data sources or your data sets grow, it can scale with you. And it's got pay-as-you-go pricing. So again, you're not signing this big contract, and when you're not using it, you just turn it off and you're saving money. So data warehouses have been around for a while, and the ETL processes that feed those data warehouses are nothing new either, right? But with the evolution of cloud data warehouses, it's really changed some things. When your warehouse is on-prem, right, dedicating a handful of servers to a data center to pull data, cleanse it, aggregate it, and push it into analytic structures, it has really become kind of standard procedure, right? Companies do it all the time. And then when they start using these cloud data warehouses, naturally a lot of them will try to reuse that infrastructure they already have in place. But Matillion's really going to take a different approach. Like the Tableau Online, Matillion is cloud native. And it's really able to take advantage of that elastic scaling of those cloud resources. So instead of ETL, we're going to kind of change the order a little bit and do ELT, right? Extract and load first, then do the transform. And by extracting and loading that data first into the CDW, in the native structure, Matillion's able to leverage the power of that massively parallel processing engine to not only load that data, but then to reshape it and push it into analytical structures designed for reporting. So this is a typical analytics ecosystem, right? On the left here, you've got data sources, right? Those data sources all over the place we talked about, from on-prem databases to SaaS providers, third-party APIs to some Excel spreadsheet that Barb in accounting put together, right? And in the middle, you're going to have your cloud data warehouse. And again, these days you really have to have one of those. As Lucas mentioned, having an organized central source of data is going to be critical for those analytics. Then on the right, you have your visualization tool, right? The way you get that data in front of your end users so your executive team isn't writing SQL statements to try and get their quarterly earnings. Having built ETL processes and working side by side with report developers for decades, really, I know firsthand that dreaded question that makes the whole team kind of wince. Love the new Tableau dashboard, great way to visualize the data, but why don't these numbers match those numbers in Barb's report? And the answer there is easy, right? Every department in the company has a slightly different way to calculate those metrics. So when you build a report for sales, their take on those calculations may or may not be the same as accounting. But if instead of running those calculations in individual reports, everyone is building reports using a centralized set of calculated values, more often than not, those numbers are going to tie out. So how do you accomplish that? Basically 2 steps. First, data ingestion, right? Getting that data up onto that cloud data warehouse. Matillion's UI is completely browser-based. Everything is point and click, drag and drop, specifically designed to be very intuitive, very easy to learn, right? You don't have to be a hardcore Python developer to get, to put these jobs together. This simplicity is going to enable you to do it yourself, right? You can consolidate data from multiple sources easy, because all you have to do is set some properties on those connectors. You don't need to know how to call the Salesforce API or what the syntax is for a copy command to load a CSV file. And you don't have to wait for IT to do it for you. You can do it yourself. As I said before, Matillion is built for the cloud. So if you need to spin up more compute to process more data faster at the start of your job, you can do that. If you need to resize that instance to run more loads in parallel, you can do that as well. Again, scalability is one of the greatest advantages of leveraging cloud technologies. So as your volumes and sources increase, it's easier to grow with them. Second step then is going to be transformation. And again, this is where Matillion is really going to stand out. There's a handful of products that can throw your data up onto a cloud data warehouse. But once it's there, it's still siloed, right? There aren't those relationships, to really tie those things together. Cloud data warehouses are explicitly designed, right, to efficiently and rapidly manipulate those large data sets. And Matillion transformations are going to allow you to kind of double down on that investment in the CDW. Use that appliance not only for your visualization, but also to conform and reorganize your data. Now, certain camps will say, well, you can merge those data sets or run those aggregations in your reports, but that type of heavy lifting is really going to slow those reports down and make them less performant. You need to let your tools do what they're good at. I mean, if you're in accounting and someone is asking you for marketing plans, you can do it, but it's not what you're best at, right? It's not your area of expertise. Same is true for your tools, right? Use visualization tools for presentation, use ETL tools to move data. So going back to our example with Barb and those mismatched numbers, right? That discrepancy is going to create confusion and mistrust of the integrity of the data. And that in turn is going to negatively impact your business. A consistent centralized data set guarantees your numbers will match and it will create confidence in your reporting. It's also going to create a democratized repository of these metrics so anyone can get to them, right? Anyone who needs to put those numbers on a report, they're always going to have access to those. And then lastly, as Lucas mentioned earlier, interface is super easy to use, right? You don't have to be a SQL wizard to put together complex data manipulations. Just drag components up onto the canvas, set some properties, and the tool is going to generate that SQL for you in the background. And then you can get back to what you do best, right? So in summary, Matillion is going to be fast, scalable, cloud native, and easy to use. So let me hand you back to Lucas, and he can detail what they were able to accomplish.
So I wanted to revisit the question we initially posed, is this possible? Yes, this has been a successful project for us, and I want to share a little bit about those successes here. So certainly, I don't think there's a lot of, let's call it encouragement out there for being so lean on a project like this, but it is certainly possible. And so let's talk about success. So, really, again, to revisit, we doubled in size in the last 10 months, and that's for a multitude of reasons. We've got an innovative product development team, as well as, just scaling our sales organization. But key thing is with that growth, processes scale. When we build processes like this, build analytics platform like this, it scales perfectly. So it makes no difference to us if there's 35 people in the sales organization or if we go to 60. And an analytics platform that's 85% self-service. So back to what I was saying about being lean and being a small company, This is true. We are able to administrate the ETL processes, build new ETL processes in-house for 85% of the time. If we have a large backlog, we would need to augment our capabilities with a partner, which we've continued to do with Data Meeting. But day-to-day use and is really self-service. And one thing I want to touch on, so automating 6,000 manual task hours so far this year. So an added benefit of having that single source of truth is for a small company, there's a lot that you can do with that. So, when you really, data quality is key and foundational to all of this. And so establishing data quality is really what's going to drive a lot of this, because if you're building all of this out, people actually have to be able to trust the data, but you can use that operationally. So when we think about our loan process of like producing a loan, we can essentially profile the data in different spots and use that really as a checklist later, and that's been pretty key for us. And we've also used Alteryx a good bit to automate a lot of what was manual data reconciliation and data movement in just this year alone. And so while if you're at a larger organization, this amount of hours doesn't seem like a lot probably, but when you're talking about teams of 8 to 10 people, 6,000 hours is very significant. And so in whole, we estimate that across our sales organization and across like our finance division, we've been able to reduce data entry by about 20% this year by using these tools. So that's really, really shined for us. And then when I say a simple model to feed the reporting needs, it's got to be relatable for people. Like, people in the business have to be able to understand this. It has to be intuitive for them to use. And I'll get more into that in just a second. But what I want to share a little bit of is, I can put dashboards up here, and we've built a lot of stuff in this past year visually, but I want to focus on the questions that we just could not answer prior to this. And so really we can talk about like our pipeline management. So, we needed a lightweight way to view our pipeline and manage workflow independent of any real system, because I don't want to have somebody sitting in underwriting with also access to the CRM and several other tools just so they have the full view of the relationship. But also, I don't want to, if I need to pass key statuses over to our servicing team, I don't have to actually build some of that into their servicing application. And so handling stuff like that in a lightweight way to manage kind of workflow was key. And so this is one central dashboard that we can slice and dice in any way possible. I had to redact some stuff. Can't give away everything. But it's been key because someone at any level of the company can have security set on this to view appropriate data about our entire company operations. And we've been able to handle that in a really lightweight dashboard. Something not possible because it would involve somebody always getting into a commercial application to answer really basic questions. And something to really focus on is spatial data. So we deal with property, and property is spatial. So thinking about it in those terms is really insightful. And so you can go borrow a lot of stuff from like logistics industries or oil and gas, because they've got a lot of best practices about how to view things spatially. But what we care about is, like, because we service loans for a very long time actually, we need to know things like weather effects. We need to know, like what would happen post-storm, because we have to do a lot of due diligence on these properties, and we have to coordinate with appraisers, with inspections on all this. And so here, I believe this was Dorian. In this example, understanding a projected, we're able to bring in almost live weather data. We could bring in radar as well, but this was the projected path of Dorian with some sample data of properties. So understanding that, hey, our properties in Central Florida are about to get hammered by this storm, that's not something you could easily glean out of an Excel sheet. Or so being able to think about it in this way, so we know we could easily, select that basically and just see, okay, well, how many properties and where are these properties that are going to be affected by the storm is really key. Something, like I said, we could not do earlier. But it also helps us think about and coordinate with appraisers. So a lot of, a big limiting step in the loan process is how quickly can you get an appraisal? And so when you're ordering these appraisals, or you're needing to see if an appraiser, granted you don't have some kind of integrated appraisal system, being able to manage and view those relationships to understand, really the vendor management aspect of that, so we can, shave off unproductive appraisers, and view things in a way that, when a property comes up for appraisal, we're able to quickly assign a local efficient appraiser to it. Again, something not really possible just a year and a half ago. And lastly, like flow diagrams. Now, this isn't going to mean a whole lot by itself, but just what I wanted to illustrate is, when you think about producing a loan, it's not unlike a manufacturing process. There's certain key cues that a loan has to pass through. And so looking at just, a point in time of a loan being processed is great because, you can see a basic period, but being able to understand, the arrival and departure through a pipeline and understanding like a flow was key. We can see the effects of process changes across the company, across different department lines, and even see, identify bottlenecks easily. And so, these tools that really allowed us to visually lay this out and understand it. So, we can confidently say like we understand throughput or constraints with capacity through departments with tools like this. So I want to spend some time talking about really what worked for us. So when I say investing in data profiles, it's really just cleaning up that data quality. If you're going to be putting everything into the central repository, you have to be able to assure that this is trustworthy data. So that has been, while it's hard to fully quantify the effects of that, it's very essential. And like I said, or I mentioned earlier, now that you can trust that data, you're able to take those processes and those QA processes around that data and then build that into your operational practices. And that's been a big efficiency gain for us. So, we're jumping on data, basically an errant entry of data as soon as it happens now. Also, when I talk about success criteria, back to those 20 questions I outlined, really centering design around those business objectives was definitely the way to go for us, because we knew what came out of this project would be valuable, and we knew we could answer essential questions about the business. Ranking the reporting needs. So when I say that, or analytics needs, I guess, when you're building this for the first time with a company that doesn't have that data culture, that doesn't understand all of this, it's really important that all this is relatable and let's call it like ingestible, I guess, and that all of this is adopted. So when we thought about this, we targeted the broadest audience we could. So, for example, we would not really go after maybe just flagging some event on an exception report for one small department, but versus, we want to look at something like that first dashboard where our entire company can access, this dashboard and be able to glean from it, data that's relative across all departments, because that's something, if it's useful, then it will be adopted. And so, like I was, when ranking those needs of what we're going to target first, we made sure that what we produced was useful. And then really data availability across the organization. So if you're in a small company, and like I said, we had limited capacity within my team, the data's got to be accessible. Like this won't be successful if you're limited by the bandwidth of just your group. You have to get people to adopt this, and you have to create, let's call it champions in other parts of the organization. So, that way your operations one of your operations teams is pretty self-sufficient with all this, and part of this is the tooling. So using these cloud native tools in Tableau Online really has made this possible and easy to manage as well. So I want to spend some time talking about what I would have liked to have done better, or what we could do better. And I think this should be relatable, and a lot of it is characteristic, I guess, of projects in general. But to do it again, I think had we leveraged our partner in data meeting more to help us train people in the business on how to understand this, on how to use these tools, we would have been a little further along. Building all this is great, but the reality is people in the business don't care about the tools, they care about the output a lot of times. And so getting that buy-in from them, I think leveraging our partner in that would have been essential. Like I said, it just took a little bit longer for that than we initially thought. Reconciling old reporting with the new. I know Jason touched on this a little bit. People are constantly breaking people of the old reports and whatever accounting is producing because they've got the cash. When you go to do that, though, you really want to make sure that you're fully addressing the scope of that prior report and spending the time in there, because there were a couple of examples in the project of where we've got the great tool and the great way to display all this visually, but there's this one catch-up or one hang-up with the new report that this Excel tracker that somebody's manually entering still has more useful data in it. So really understanding the existing reporting when you go to reconcile the old with the new. One thing about data access, when I talk about including all vendors, so being a small company, we rely a lot on third parties for our key commercial platforms, and I expressed that there's some data access issues with those typically. We kind of surprised some of our partners with this project, thinking that because we surprised them, it would kind of strong arm them, I guess, into playing along. Had we included them from the onset of this effort, I think we would have had, let's say, less hang up around data access. So in general, I think being transparent and honest about your roadmap with all your technology vendors is probably the best way to go. But like I said, our partner, strategic partner, was key in helping to negotiate that. And when I say spend time with legacy reporting, I broke that out from the reconciliation of reports, but there's a lot of questions. Like when we went to go ask these 20 questions across the company of like, what do we need to answer? Well, we found out that maybe somebody's asking a question, about our construction process, but the question they're giving us is not actually what they want to know. And had we gone hands-on with their legacy reporting, we would have been able to discover that. So I really think that would help adoption in some of those areas. Also a tip though, I don't know what the structure is like at your company, but if you just take a hatchet to some of the older reporting, you don't have anything to reconcile against. So that's highly advisable if that's possible. So I guess in all, what I really want to say, and I hope this session is relatable, is I would encourage anyone thinking about undertaking a full, it's called life cycle project like this that's really building from the ground up. It is very possible. It's probably not as expensive as you think. You don't need as many people as you think you might, as long as you make the right decisions, you understand your business, and you're targeting the right things. And so with that, I'm actually going to hand things back over to Jason for a moment.
Thanks, Lucas. So just want to finish up by saying, appreciate you guys coming out. Definitely swing by the Matillion booth downstairs for a free demo or to find out how to set up a free trial of Matillion. And with that, we'd like to open it up to any questions that you guys might have.
Cool. Well, I think we're good. I appreciate everybody coming today.